It's a privilege to be asked to speak here, especially on St David's Day. A frequently asked question has been, why a book on Eisteddfod chairs? And I must admit I've often wondered myself over the last couple of years. Nobody, or at least very few people, seem to actually like these chairs. The heyday of their production was the 1890s through to the 1930s, and many thousands were produced for local and regional as well as national events. The designs were eclectic and often unappealing to the modern eye. Like this grandiose or perhaps grotesque example made for the National Eisteddfod held in Llyfrgell in 1895, complete with trumpeting angels and hanging tassels. It bears a plaque inscribed by the designer and maker, Henry Williams of Llangefni. He was only 21 years old, and during his career he made many more in this style. Eisteddfod chairs such as this are piled up, sometimes covered in debris, in museum basements, chapel vestries and school storerooms. But they are invariably well made and well carved, usually in Welsh oak, and they represent a unique cultural tradition, so they deserve a second look. And I should state at the outset that I am the co-author of the Bardic chair, I Cadair wrth. I embarked on the study with Dr. Sioned Williams, the furniture curator at St Fagans, who was preparing an exhibition of the museum's chairs to coincide with the National Eisteddfod held in Cardiff in 2008. And so the book was a collaboration. But I can only really speak for my own interests and motives in this survey of what the subject is about. When we first discussed the book, I didn't think there was a lot to be said, or that it would be a very long text. This chair seemed typical, and I saw its main context as the grand chapel architecture of the period. I thought we could get a few more examples, put in a few earlier precursors of the style, and finish up with a couple of modern chairs, and that would be all you could say on the subject. This is from almost a century later, the Llanrwst chair of 1989, made by Hugh Selwyn Owen, a traditional furniture maker in the Conwy Valley, and himself a poet. And I would like at this point to acknowledge the support given by Howell Tavy Edwards. I encountered a comment of his many years ago to the effect that so many Eisteddfodau in the past regularly gave chairs that the numbers involved would make even the bravest researcher fearful. And that challenge stayed with me. Howell generously provided an enthusiastic foreword in which he refers to my newly minted curiosity, and he was very proud of that phrase. As I examined and photographed more chairs and learned more about the makers and the winners, I had become drawn in, and I saw more of the significance of these chairs, the way these sometimes bizarre objects were a window into the past and into the present distinctive culture. But I've always been intrigued by Eisteddfod chairs, so it's a newly crystallised rather than a newly minted interest. In 1994, 5 years after this picture was taken, I curated an exhibition of Welsh furniture in Mould Library, and the librarian showed me a miniature chair that she had won at her school Eisteddfod a couple of years previously. And I was sufficiently interested to record the details, but I admit not sufficiently enough to take a photograph. But looking back over old notes when the book was near its end, I realised the miniature that she had won had been made by this gentleman, Hugh Selwyn Owen. He made numbers of these chairs, which he donated to local Eisteddfodau, including those held in schools. Typically, at such events, the winner is chaired in a full-size chair and presented with a miniature. And this awarding of a miniature chair is, in effect, a reintroduction of the medieval system. The poet was given an emblem, perhaps a miniature silver chair, after being formally chaired in a ceremonial fashion. And this is a ceremonial chair from Tregeeb, on the outskirts of Llandilo. It dates from the 15th century and is in a distinctly Welsh style. And this detail of circa 1200 shows an Irish poet accompanying himself on the harp, sitting in a similar chair. The received wisdom is that the presentation of actual chairs is relatively recent, only about 130 years old. And of course that the Eisteddfod as we know it today is less than 200 years old. Now, my own contribution as a furniture historian has been to try to establish that despite significant gaps, there is nevertheless a continuous tradition from the medieval period until the present day. The practice of awarding a chair to the winner of a poetic contest is first documented in the 12th century, when an Eisteddfod was held in Cardigan Castle under the auspices of Rhys ap Griffith. And that's a very long tradition, and one that's unique to Wales. There are a number of specifically Welsh types of medieval and Tudor furniture, and this turn chair represents one of them. and it's the kind of ceremonial chair which may have been used for poets in the 15th and 16th centuries. There's no evidence of formal Eisteddfodau in the 17th century, although poets continued to come together for competitive events. From 1680, these were advertised in almanacs, and the Almanac Eisteddfodau became an important feature of the early 18th century. Now, it isn't known whether chairs were part of the proceedings, but if they were, they might have been of this style. This was made in Monmouthshire in the mid-17th century, and I show it because it's a clear precursor of what became the Eisteddfod chair with which we're all familiar. This is the earliest chair that we know was presented. It was won by Twm o'r Nant at Llanrwst in 1788. And it's a wonderful chair made in the district 80 years previously, around 1700. So it wasn't made specifically for the event. It was probably used on that occasion because it was of such good quality and just seemed appropriate at the time. The brass plaque on the back gives the details of the event. In 1789, the Genedlaethol, a cultural society of North Walian expatriates in London, were enlisted to formalise the proceedings. In Bala in September 1789, this silver medal was awarded to the winner, Gŵyl. It was made by Augustin Dupré, the official engraver of the French Republic. And it shows a flamboyant French chair on a plinth, but there's no suggestion that such a chair was actually used. Now this is a beautiful chair and a recent and notable discovery. It's the earliest chair known to have been made specifically for an Eisteddfod, the Dyfed Eisteddfod held in Carmarthen in 1819. It was made by David Morley, the preeminent cabinet maker in the town. And this was a significant occasion. It was the first Eisteddfod when the Gorsedd ceremonies, the inventions of Iolo Morgannwg, were introduced into the proceedings. The ceremonies weren't very elaborate at that time. The stone circle was formed from pebbles kept in Iolo's pocket, and the winning poet, Gŵyl once more, had a blue ribbon tied round his arm as initiation into the order of bards. And the poet was presented with a silver medal. This showed a fashionable chair, probably taken from a pattern book, but we didn't know for certain that an actual chair of that design had been used. The Dyfed chair was later recorded as being kept in Llanganna Vicarage on the outskirts of Carmarthen, and it's descended with its story intact in the family of Canon Griffiths, and it recently came to the attention of the National Museum. I'd often wondered what the chair of 1819 was like. As Iolo Morgannwg was responsible for inventing so much, I felt he must have had a view about what an Eisteddfod chair should look like, and it might have given a clue as to why at a later date they took such a grandiose form. Now, as it turns out, this chair isn't much like the later ones, but it does have some of the basic ingredients. It's made of what was called at the time British oak, that is native Welsh oak, with its Druidic associations. And it's in what at the time was seen as a Gothic style, which the Eisteddfod programme recorded as particularly relevant. And it bears a national emblem in the form of a harp. Whenever Iolo Morgannwg visited Carmarthen, he is said to have slept in the chair, because it was the chair of Dyfed and because he was asthmatic and he slept sitting up. And about the only thing I have in common with Iolo is that I'm asthmatic, but I can't really imagine wanting to sleep in this chair. The present owner of the chair, who lives in Oxfordshire, has very generously placed it on loan with Carmarthen Museum, and the museum already has the portrait of the maker, David Morley, which was painted by Hugh Hughes, who also engraved this medal.